7.4 million people face acute hunger levels in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. That's according to the World Food Programme, which is urging governments to scale up support for families caught up in this crisis. At a high level, ministerial conference held today on the Central Sahel, 24 donors pledged nearly $1.7 billion to scale up life-saving humanitarian aid to millions of people in the struggling West African countries. The virtual conference was co-hosted by Denmark, Germany and the European Union and the United Nations. For more on this story, I'm now joined via Zoom by the spokesperson for the World Food Programme in West Africa, George Fominyen. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so this is a pretty desperate situation. Has this been growing and escalating for some time?
It has been escalating for some time, exactly. Over the past few years, we have seen a spike in violence in what is known as the Central Sahel, that encompasses Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And what that has led to is a huge lot of displacement. What we have seen over the past few years is we've gone from 77,000 people who were displaced about 2 years ago to over 1.5 million people. So with those displacements also come a lot of hardship in terms of humanitarian needs, including food insecurity.
All right, so this conference that happened today, what was the aim? What were you trying to do?
The aim of this conference, which was organized, which was hosted by Denmark, Germany, the European Union and the United Nations, was to, first of all, bring attention to this situation, that the world should not forget what is happening in the Central Sahel in particular. And in terms of not forgetting what is happening in the Central Sahel, it would mean funding the humanitarian, but also the development work which is going on in that area. And that was the message that came through today when most of the participants took the floor. It was to highlight the fact that it was important from the perspective of humanity not to forget the people of the Central Sahel, and also to take action in the immediate to help them in terms of emergency assistance, and to ensure that that is brought in consideration of the longer term root cause and development needs that we have in this region.
All right, and significant pledges have been made.
Well, as you rightly announced at the very beginning of this conversation, there were 24 donors today who pledged about 1.7 billion US dollars, and the expectation is that once these funds will be released, there will be funds to support people this year, but there will also be funding which will be used next year. And that's what's most important, because this is a crisis that would continue. If we do not come to a situation of peace, we are seeing here a lot of people who are suffering because of the fact that we are having increased violence, insecurity, which is compounding already existing situations in this particular region of the Central Sahel. That is climate issues. You've got erratic rainfall patterns and droughts and all of that, and poverty, which is very, very present in these areas. And so it is something that requires assistance today, but also needs that attention tomorrow.
All right, talking about the number of displaced, I believe over 1.6 million displaced in the region, but Burkina Faso seems to be the worst hit of all the countries there.
Burkina Faso, we've seen over the course of the year, of this year, about 300% rise in the number of people who are displaced. They've gone to about 1 million people displaced in a very short period of time. I was visiting I regularly visit Burkina Faso, and last year when I was in Burkina Faso about this same time, it was we're talking about 200,000, 250,000, 300,000. Now you're talking about more than 1 million people who have been forced to flee their homes. And the real issue here, when we talk about more than 1 million people forced to flee their homes, we have to remember that it's not a number only. It's actually people. And what's happening to these people is that they've left what they normally do. So if someone was a farmer, then they can't go on, they can't continue to do it. If they were surviving on subsistence farming, it means they cannot do that anymore to have the food that they will eat. A lot of these people are also herders, which means that they have to run away and abandon their herds of livestock. And that's all of their livelihoods gone. And these are sometimes when these people could be where people who could work and earn a living, now because of the disruption that they are facing, they can't even find markets where to buy the things that they need. Then they need shelter, they need water, they need sanitation, they need food. And then they are going to live with people who themselves are faced with enormous challenges already. And that really makes things difficult. I was in Burkina Faso last week or the week before last. And when I spoke to local community members, they told me in one of the communities near Kaya, in the central north region of the country, they said, we have welcomed those who were displaced because we have never seen this sort of a thing. It looks to us like it's cinema. But the problem is that the little well that we used to have where we could draw water, now there are many more people. The women told me that they had to wait for longer hours before they could get to draw water. The men talked about being worried that there was not enough infrastructure in the hospitals and so on. So you can imagine the pressure that comes with all of this.
All right, and there's I suppose things that become consequential to this kind of displacement. Children, vulnerable, not getting education, disease, health issues also get compounded. A plethora of things that you now have to deal with beyond just hunger.
There are a plethora of things. The basic social services, which you mentioned, already in this region, they were in these countries due to issues of underdevelopment and of poverty. They weren't very existing in the past, but now with the situation, it's even worse off. There are thousands of schools that have been forced to close due to insecurity, and it means tens of thousands of children who can no longer go to school. Then you have health centers which are no longer operating because the people who were working in these health centers are afraid of fear for their lives, and so they cannot continue. So it brings about a lot of things. And then you come back to the one you mentioned, which is hunger here, and that is real. Because people can't be able to do to grow the food that they needed or to have access to the markets that they could have they could acquire what they need. And the worst situation is for those of them who sometimes are stuck in the areas which are not accessible. They're very inaccessible areas. And that's where we have the most concern, I have to say, Peter. There are communities in the northern parts of Burkina Faso where because it's inaccessible these past few months and the markets are not working properly, there's a fear that some people are very close. They're just a step or so from famine, and that is not nice. We cannot be in this day and age and we live in a situation where people have to die because they do not have food.
All right, so food and aid has been pledged, but another challenge is that aid workers are being targeted by armed groups, so they can't reach the people that need the help.
Indeed, that's one of the challenges which we're facing in the region at the moment. It's that access to people. We really need to reach people, because when we do not reach people, then there is a spike, as we have seen, in the number of people who go hungry, in the number of people who then become more and more destitute. And so it boils down to the whole issue of peace, Peter. It is important that we are in a situation where there is no conflict, because when there is conflict, then there is a potential that we're going to have hunger. And that is a real challenge. And that is a concern which I think humanity must face and look at. And it's something that we're living in, that people are living currently in the Central Sahel. And that's one of the reasons why there is this real need for attention, to a call for attention to what is happening in this region.